A boy in my class came in. He was supposed to go get contact lenses. And I noticed he came without the contact lenses. I asked him what happened. He said the doctor told him that he can't sleep in them. I said, so why do you insist on sleeping in your contact lenses? So he said, I hope in jest, it's not the problem is at night. I said, what do I do during shiur? He said, very complicated. I have to start taking out the lenses every time shiur starts. There's that famous word from the Panovich Rav that when Rommel is about to march into Eretz Yisrael and he's building Panovich, they said to him, you're dreaming. So he said, I'm dreaming, but I'm not sleeping. And I have to wonder right now, as we are sitting here, as the world turns in the matzif that it is, are we the opposite of the Panovich Rav? Are we maybe sleeping and not even dreaming? If you just take into account the events that occurred to Klal Yisrael the last couple of days, the Patira of Tzaddikim, the tragedies, I noticed something in human nature, and I may be wrong about this. The story in France first came out, so they said it's a neo-Nazi. And in a sense, there was a kind of relative, and I use the word relative very restrictively over here, relative, like a menuchas hanefesh, in the sense that, okay, well, neo-Nazis we can deal with, there's always a few on the fringe. When it changed, and as it appears now, that it's part of, the Taliban and so, I noticed people seem to be much more concerned about it. And I began to wonder, how does our psychic work? How does human nature work? Right? You hear that somebody is sick, Rahman al with a machla. You feel terrible for that person. You hear that somebody is sick with an extremely rare disease. So we feel bad for the person. We don't feel as bad. Why? Because we aren't as threatened by it. So the Rebbe Hashem doesn't really want to threaten us. But it almost seems like the Rebbe Hashem is pushing us to the point where, hello, wake up. I mean, look at this story now that took place, this Schachter of children. The French government is clearly going out of their way to reassure, to secure, and they're showing a tremendous amount of honor. Yeah, they took losses they paid with more lives. I mean, if you go back in history, however, you have to realize that there's probably no Dalet Amos in Europe that isn't drenched with Jewish blood. France is the land of Rashi. It has to be that Rashi's there with open arms to accept little children. France is also the land of the Crusades. Dozens of Balei Tosfos gave up their lives. I think even today in history, there's a story of it took times of King Louis. There's a whole story of the burning of the Shas and everything that took place. It wasn't France per se, it was Europe. Many of the Balei Tosfos were killed on Kiddush Hashem. If you look in the Sechtes Nazir, there is a Amid that is completely Tosfos. In the Sechtes Baba Kama and Merubah, there's an Amid that's almost completely Tosfos, which is great for catching up for Daf Yomi, by the way. It's very tough on Daf Yomi and Megiddo Yorim when it's long Tosfos. And they say that why is it that there's an Amid over there, complete Tosfos, no Gemara there? They say that those Balei Tosfos learned that sugya the night before they were killed. And they knew they were going to be killed the next morning, and they sat up the whole night on learning. We have to view the tragedies, not in the context of an individual event, although for the families, Nebuch, there is no individual event that's going to affect them more, but in the context of Galus and Klal Yisrael and Mashiach. Now, I will tell you a Dover Pella. Today, right after the Levaya, Kalma Vasser had an interview with Rav Shimon Rosenberg, who is the father-in-law of Rav Gavriel Halsberg, was of course the Kedoshim from Mumbai. And he said that this child that was killed, this Heilige Neshama that went up to Shemayim so pure, his name was Gavriel, and he was named after Gavriel Halsberg in Mumbai. He was born right after the Mumbai tragedy, and his father was so moved by what had happened that he named his child after the person that was killed. Now, I don't want to go there in terms of trying to figure out whose neshama is whom. That's not for us. And in terms of the individual pain to families, it doesn't. But Lamaisa, sometimes you see that the Ashgacha is so clear that the Rabbi Hashem has a cheshbon with everything. Now, the Derech Hashem says that the vast majority of us aren't here for the first time. We've been around before. You know, when you turn a street and it looks familiar, you never know. Satmar Rebbe said, we've mentioned this many times, he said, be careful with your children, they may be your parents. That he held very strongly that this whole generation that blossomed now is the generation of the 6 million. You know, we don't know where we were around. In one split second, everything kind of clicks in. So most neshamas come down the Gilgul, says the Derech Hashem, because they did something not right the first time. However, there is a concept, says the Derech Hashem, when the neshamas come down to this world because they volunteer to come down to this world for a variety of reasons. They either volunteer to come down to this world to help people, they volunteer to come down to this world because they have a friend that needs help and they say, I don't want to leave him here alone, I'm coming down. Often spouses will either volunteer or they're forced to come down with each other. We've mentioned many times from the Chidah, the beginning of the Schachter Saita, it says a lot of times Shana Rishayna is rocky, and then things settle down. He says that's because that subconsciously one spouse says, you know, I'm only down because of you. Like, you know, I could have been a Gan Eden now. Why did you schlep me down over here? So we don't know how these things work, but there are such a thing. There are the neshamas that come down l'chatchila knowing they're going to be a kapara for the dar, and that's why they're coming down. So, you know, how does that affect us? So what should I do with this information? What we should do with the information is that there are neshamas and there are people that gave their lives for us. If they gave their lives for us, then we owe them to kind of change our lives. And I think that there was a shmooze from Rav Steinemann, who said we're in denial. He said there was a series of tragedies that took place around us, around here, around everywhere. He said that we're not taking Iran seriously. We're not taking seriously the fact that there's a threat to the world. I'm kind of saying, hey, you know, God will never let it happen. But the Rebbe wants us to change, and we're not getting it. The tzaddikim are kind of an iron dome. Right? The iron dome, it's a protection. You know, another tzaddik leaves the world is missing something. Just for a moment, Moshe just told me a beautiful word from Rav Steinberg. I just want to preface, Rav Steinberg was in a way the Masmid Hadar. I think that Rabbi Yerucham in the Mir said that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz and Reb Chaim Pinchas ben Reb Yaakov Yitzchak Steinberg were the biggest masnidim in the entire Mir. And the Mir had very long sidarim, and they had no phone room downstairs, and no coffee room, and no place to hang out. So basically, the only thing that was outside was mud. There was no place to go, except the Beis Medrash. I think they had plumbing, so if anything, the only Beis Medrash in town that had plumbing, so that was the place where you stayed. You know, to say that these two were the biggest masmidim in the Mir, time was very precious. Let me tell you a little bit about time. Someone told me, I very often, I get things right. I come to speeches either a half hour too early, half hour too late, or can't find the address, or can't find parking. And sometimes I write it down on my little blue calendar, which is the old-time, you know, iPads. But they work very well around it. Battery never runs out. Gets very good charging time, these things. Like, never have to recharge them. I don't know. One day somebody will think of making one of these calendars. In any event, so someone told me, you know, I don't have a pen, I write it down, I forget it. Tell the guy to text you the message. All the information. And you won't have to call him 10 times to ask him like a fool if you're coming. So this week, I had a speech in Queens. And I said to the guy, he started calling me, text me all the information. I looked, I had it. I'm a chaya. Right before the speech, I checked, put the address into the GPS. I even wrote down the topic. Now you know when I start preparing, I'm on my way to the speech. And I have it all done. It's done deal. You know? Even wrote down the information, where to park. And Baruch Hashem, and I drove, and there was a lot of traffic, and followed the GPS. Everything's so electronic. I went off the BQE, I went down Atlantic Avenue, and it was Gavaldik, and up the Interbar, and I came there, circled for parking, and I got out, and I walked over, and I was so proud of myself. I had the topic, I had my notes, I was here on time, I rang the bell, no one's there. I take a quick look at the text message. I looked multiple times, right address, right time, and I saw it said March 25th. Sunday night. Wrong Sunday. I just drove an hour and a half, that's 45 minutes in each direction, to the wrong speech. I tell you, I did feel bad when there was a lot of parking in front of the place. It's always that catch-22 when you go to give a speech and there's too much parking. You say, wait a second, what's going on here? Like, you want to find, you don't want to find. Everything is in the time. If you have the wrong day, if you don't chap what day it is, then you have nothing. And time is something that Rav Chaim Pinchas ben Rav Yaakov Yitzchak Scheinberg, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, was known for. In the 101 years on this world, he did not waste any time. And Moshe just reminded me that he said, actually he taught me, he didn't remind me, I didn't know it beforehand. The person who's Chafetz Chaim is the one who is Oyev Yom, who appreciates the value of each day. There are pictures of him learning in an elevator, pictures of him learning Ben Gavra LeGavra. But Rav Savitsky, Zolzan Gesundenstark, gave a shmuz today in Torah Das. He said an amazing thing. He said he was such a tremendous masmid, Ben Gavra LeGavra. He never took his head out of the Gemara. But if an almana or a yosim or someone that needed chizik came over, everything stopped. Smiled, spoke to him. The world came to a stop, and was very, very different. He also brought out another important point, which I think is extremely important for all of us. Rav Scheinberg went to learn in the Mir in the 30s, I believe. Right? He was born in 1911. I mean, he came to Kiryas Matisov in the 60s. And he was a masmid over here in America. 1920s, that's when everyone was standing around Ebbets Field trying to catch balls. Watching them play the Yankees. How could they always play the Yankees? Every single... Was there, I don't know, you read these books, it's like it was World Series all day, all year. No? I don't know. It was playing the Yankees or the Giants. Was there any other baseball team in America? Or, I don't know. But, it wasn't like today. He was a master when no one was a master. He was a master when there was no one there. Rav Pamskan, I remember saying that his friends left him, he was all alone. He said he was in Brownsville, he was all alone. Didn't have one friend that had a sucker to learn. He said he took out a Shulchan Aruch, it was a Shulchan Aruch every day, and he learned 9 hours himself every single day. He said, to me and the Torah, I have no friends here, no one here. Rav Pam taught every single class, and toward the end of his life, he taught Yeridei. He said, the Torah that you learn with the biggest Mesiras Nefesh comes to greet you before you go up to the Olam Emes. He was toilet in that Inyan. In those moments that you want to give up and you say, I'm going to keep going. Now, I'm just quoting Rav Savitsky's head, that Rav Scheinberg did not necessarily have a good head. That could have been far better than anything I could ever imagine, but relatively speaking, as far as Gedolim go, he wasn't one of those child prodigies that knew all of Shas by the time by his upsharing, gave up there and gave a drasha. But he sat down and he broke through. He fought, broke through. Harvard and Harvard and Harvard. And what happens? And through his asmada, he becomes one of the greatest mechabrim, one of the greatest Rosh Yeshivas in the world. Rav Savitsky also spoke about an amazing zrizus that he had, which is all really part of it. He said he would walk the shul, nobody could keep up with him. He was talking about he was in the 90s. In Kippur morning, davening the Sikin by the Kaisel. Now here's the catch. A lot of people do that. But then he would come to yeshiva and pick up the davening from Chazar Sashatz. I don't know if you understand that. Imagine davening the Sikin, okay? Shavuos morning, right? You daven the Sikin Shavuos morning. You get to that, I don't believe it, right? 8 o'clock in the morning, and your bed is waiting for you a long Shavuos day. Now imagine davening Vasikin, and then say, let me sit there and learn another couple of hours, and I'll pick up the regular minyan shul that finishes at 12 o'clock, from Chazar Sashatz. I mean, imagine doing that.
Every day I mostly do.
Every day there?
Every day daven next.
Every day daven Shachris and I picked up Chazar Sashatz Yeshiva. Wow. So, and this is, every day is amazing. And just doing this on Yom Kippur morning, wearing 100 pairs of tzitzis on you, going back and forth, and no coffee. I don't know how, so Akopanim, it's very interesting. Rashiva said, people say treif in America. I don't understand why. He once said, America's treif. Why is it treif? He said, if you ask him if there is such an expression, I would say it for one reason. That in America, time doesn't have value. It's only money. And if it's not for money, it's take it easy, take it easy. And that's all. It's interesting. Rosh Hashiva gave the speech in Yiddish. He asked one of the boys sitting next to me, understand Yiddish? No. You got the shmooze? He says, anything you understood? I said, 3 words. So take it easy, he said. Right. No, he didn't say to take it easy. He said, just to tell you. But the most amazing story that he said was that he was in the bunker in 1967 when the Jordanian artillery was zetzing Kiryat Matisdav, and that was pretty much a front-line place. And Rav Scheinberg, he didn't say this, but I read it later, he had his own miklat. But he electively came and said he's going to spend this night that artillery shells are falling on their head, he's going to spend it together with the Bachrim to be mechasik them, they shouldn't feel that they're alone. So he came and he sat down with them. And he said, not to his knowing, the Rebbitzin ran up and down as the shells were falling to rescue his ksavim, rescue his writings and bring it down. This is a girl that grew up on the Lower East Side in the 1920s. She was the daughter, of course, of the famous of Yaakov Yosef Herman, the All for the Boss. And he said, that Rav Savitsky said, I think he said it like he saw it himself. That's what it sounded like. He was there. He said, people were petrified and the buildings were shaking. The artillery is falling, the Jordanian is pounding, it's over any second, this building is caving in. He sat there with a Gemara, with a smile on his face, and he was learning as if he did not have a daiga in the world, all the serenity. He mentioned afterwards that 4 buildings around and around were hit very hard, and this building wasn't touched. I mean, you want to know what Gedolim of yesteryear are all about. But I'll tell you how this is a shtickl negeya to us. After the Petira of the Chafetz Chaim, I forgot who it was, maybe Rabbi Chaim Meiser, who said that you have to be very careful with Lashon Hara now. Why do you have to be very careful with Lashon Hara? This is a terrible line. This guy told me this, that he says, I was never from. He says, and the Gabbai of the shul invited me. And amazing, I had no shaykhs to frumkeit, and the Gabbai invited me. I was there for Shabbos 2 years, and now I speak Lashon Hara fluently, he says. So, gotta be careful with it. So he said, you gotta be unbelievably careful with Lashon Hara. He said after the Chafetz Chaim was nifter. Why? Because the way it works in Shemayim is, they invite the Tzaddik Hadar to sit on the Bezdin, that rules people, that judges people. And you see, the Chafetz Chaim is sitting on the Bezdin, you don't want to be the one to come up there, that you were the one that spoke Lashon Hara. I forgot there was someone who said, based on this story, after the Stipler was nifter, that, it's a good time to, fix up our Hasmada. Because I think, so considering now, what do we got to, now that we know who's on the Bezdin, what do we have to be extra careful with? And I think it's this excuse that some of us have, including myself in our own way. I'm no Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael. Don't ask me to learn. Not in my area of my life. I was pushed out of yeshivas, I was thrown out, I was this, I was that, And the wrong place and the wrong time in my life that I could open up a Gemara. Besides the fact that it does not go into my head. I don't have the head to learn. I think it's the wrong time to use that excuse. Because here, look at someone who grew up in the wrong time in America, with the wrong kind of head, in the wrong environment, and a block away from Ebbetsfield becomes the, from the Gedolei Adar, the Rosh Hashivas, the kind of Rosh Hashivas. So I think this excuse is not going to work with this judge. Because he's going to say, look at me. You try. You learn. Now, I've heard all sorts of rumors about why. I think in his younger years he wore 100 pair of tzitzis at one time, but then when he got older it went down to 75. But whatever it is, I'm not suggesting that we do that. We're not on that level. Neither are we on the level to wear tefillin all day. But remember, to wear tefillin all day, the reason we don't wear tefillin all day is because we can't keep the level of kedusha that is mandatory for tefillin. And the Ramah technically says if you can't keep your mind pure, you shouldn't put on tefillin. So what's our excuse for putting on tefillin in the morning? So we have an excuse to God. We're going to say, what should I do? You told me to put it on. I'll put it on. But if you're wearing it all day, that means you must be on the level. Now, clearly, wearing tefillin all day wasn't just wearing tefillin all day. But I think with this cheshbon, that one should be careful. Maybe we should be a little bit more careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis in our own lives now. Not even the one pair we wear, not 100 pairs, just the one pair. Maybe, at home, sometimes in our pajamas, even though you don't have to wear tefillin at night, but also shmira, be rizal. Sometimes when we're playing ball, it's uncomfortable, so we fold the tzitzis up on the side. Maybe now as an Indian that we should be a little bit more careful with this, considering that we know who's on the bezin. Tonight is also the yard site of someone that the Divrei Chaim, the Sons of Rav, said is the Schlüssel of Parnasa, the key to Parnasa. So maybe very good to listen to this, because I think we can all use a little bit. His name was Rav Shlomo Rabinowitz of Redomsk, who was nifter in Tar Chavav, that's 1906. And I want to show you a Dvar Torah from the Redomsk Rebbe. He said, Adam ki yakriv mikem karvin lashem. Just a little bit of a hakdama. You want the Yisod B'Shorish Shavayda talks about this at length. It's up here Rizal. The Rizal explains that basically our primary avoida is capture the flag. I shouldn't say capture the flag, like treasure hunt. You know how camps do it? They spread like 1,000 different papers all over camp, and you got to go find it. By the Chet Eitz Hadas, imagine I was holding a bag of millions and millions of trillion-dollar pearls, and all of a sudden, boom! I knocked into something, and they rolled all over the place. So I would spend a good part of my life looking for every last solitary one. That is basically what we are doing. Right? Imagine someone on top of the Empire State Building empties out a feather pillow and it flies all over New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Go find each feather. That's basically what we are doing. Now, how do I know how to find it? So the Rebbe Hashem helps us along. And the Arizal says, the things in your life you encounter, the things you own, definitely the things you eat, is your bead to pick up, your piece of marble to pick up. Or Chaim HaKadosh talks about this. If you have a tremendous... Now this comes in many different ways. So for example, there's a piece of grass that grows and the animal eats it, and you eat the animal. This is a hashgacha min hashemayim, that piece of steak is your steak. And when you make a shahako, and you make a burning nefashis, or you bench, or you invite an oiruch to the meal, you are just misakeing this piece of meat. You brought it back to where it was supposed to do. The Yisad V'Shar Shalavoida says that's why it's extremely important to learn a little bit during the table. Even you say it about Torah, look into a sefer, learn a sefer, Mishnah Brura, just say it. I remember the Skolani Rebbe, he was blind, couldn't see a thing, he had 10,000 heart attacks. He was like the doctor said, it's a nest that he's alive. And he was there, and they gave him something to eat. It was like a little tish, and he said, something bothered him. He couldn't even talk. He said, you have to learn. To learn anything. So they took out a Mishnah Brura, it was Chanukah, and I remember the Gabi was reading the halacha that if you forget Al Nisim, you should say, Rachman hu yasalanu nisim v'neflois. Remember, his face lit up. Rachman hu yasalanu nisim v'neflois. Now you can imagine how lucky that piece of bread was. But in essence, whatever you connect with in life has a shaykhs to you. You have to have it. And the Yorechaim HaKadosh takes us a step further. If you have a particular taiva, you have a temptation, a craving to something which is either you better stay away from, or you're not allowed to have, you're not bad. This is your tikkun in life. And when you are misakin this, and you turn this around, so you should know, you just put back that pearl, that Kadosh Baruch Hu appreciates that in a tremendous way. And a lot of times we run away from our nisyonis. But our nisyonis is the purpose why we're down here. I picked you up and put you 10 feet over the mountain on the other side of the river. Why'd you put me here for? Because this is where you got to pick up your stuff. This is where you got to do it. You know, the guy comes to school late. The teacher says, why are you late? He said he saw a big sign in front of the school. It said, slow, school. So he figured he has to slow down. You got to slow down. We have to learn the messages, those nisyonis in life that we have. This is our tikkun. I never even told you about this car I had. This is like a station wagon at the beginning of my career. So my first kids, they used to in the old station wagons, they were much flatter. So they would put the suitcases on top of the, and the kids would jump on the back, on the roof. So it sunk in. The whole roof came in a lot. I didn't have a sunroof, but it came down, which was extremely convenient because when it would rain, the water would pile up all the way, and it was like a whole yam. And then I would drive, hit the brakes, and the water came cascading, and it was this car wash that cleaned all the windows in a most... once I got stuck in an undesirable neighborhood, it was pouring, and I saw a bunch of guys coming around the car, looked like trouble, and I zets down on my brakes, and they got splashed, didn't know what hit them, and I just took off. I said, Tommy, did any of the new cars offer this? Right? I said, the little problems in life, those are our Yeshuas. The Rebbe Hashem says you're here. We want to run away from it. And why do we eat matzah and then maror? So Rav Shlomo Lebracha said because Pesach we come to the darga where we realize the maror is the higher level. I know we'd like everything to be our way. But when you reach this level, those little problems in life, that's why I'm supposed to be there. Shraga Feivel Mendelovitz once saw a Talmud, he's walking, ripped off a leaf from a bush. He said, what are you ripping the leaf off the bush? Everything in this brie has a purpose. There's a mitzvah that has to be performed. Don't just stop rip it off. I heard this in my Mishgiach, he was once walking, and it was early in the morning, there was this big bush, shaking back and forth. He said, it's saying Shira. Don't you see this whole bush is saying Shira to Hashem? And there was like this little taller leaf on top that was waving back and forth. He said, and that's the Baal Tefillah. He said, you see it? So now, Zaktat Torah Shloima, and he quotes the Arizal, that Adam Arishon is very interested that we should fix, because he feels very guilty. So he wants to fix the part that we messed up. And when a person is nifter, a person leaves this world, all neshamos brings the Torah Shloima, look it up in Parasha Vayikra, are brought to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. No one goes up straight to Shemayim. You got a free ride to Chevron, and you're brought to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, and they wake up Adam Harishon. And Adam says to you, to me, after 120 years, he says to us, did you do your part in picking up the beads that I dropped, the pearls that I dropped by the Chet Tzadah? So he said, how am I supposed to know to pick it up? Those were your nisyonos in life. Now, to understand this a little bit more, the Balatanya says, or Dessler talks about it a lot also, that Adam Arisha was an Neshama HaKoleles, all of the Neshamas in the Bria. And we were in Adam Arisha. We were part of Adam Arisha. There's a famous story of the Rebbe of Zisha, the Rebbe Melech. Why did we let Adam Arisha eat from the Eitzadas? But it says some were from the Moyach of Adam Arisha. Those are the great thinkers of the generations. Some are from different parts of Adam Arisha's body. Or some say it goes chronologically. And right before Mashiach, we're Ikvus of the Mashiach. And some say Ikvus is a lashon of Akev, an ankle. That we are the Neshamas of the ankle of Adam Harisha. But we're going to have to look into Adam Harisha's face and say, I didn't realize I was supposed to do this for you. You didn't realize? What do you think you had this guidance for? Yetze Adam, Lefa'alai, Ulevidasai, Ade Areb. Yetze Adam, he says. Adam is Adam Harisha. Lefa'alai, Ulevidasai, he goes out and is prodding us along and begging us, please do it. Stand up to your Nisyainais. Ade Areb, till Mashiach comes. Because Mashiach can't come till every single one of those last beads or pearls are picked up in this mush. If we don't do it, we've got to come down to the world to do it again. And that's one of the reasons that Sefer Tehillim gets us through life. Because who's David HaMelech? Adam Arishan, right? Adam gave away his last 70 years for David HaMelech. That's why Koyach of Tehillim carries us through life. It gives us the Koyach to stand up to our Nisyainais. Says the Tfera Shloimeh, Schare Harbe Ma'oid. Ma'oid is a lashon of Adam. Ish al pi pa'aloi. Then a Shabbos is right to your simcha if you did what you were supposed to do for Adam Harisha. Yetze Adam l'fali l'vdasei Adi Arav. Now, here's the point. So we've got to look at it this way. It's Adi Arav, he says. It's before Mashiach comes. God says, listen, I let these beads around the world already 6,000 years. You got to pick them up now. I sent you down to this world 10 times. Don't run away from your Nisyanis. You know, the car has to be clean. I'm going to clean it one day before Pesach. It's before Pesach. We got to do it now. I was so embarrassed. I went someplace. One of my little aniklach was in someone else's car. We went for a ride. This guy gave me a ride. He looks down. He says, Zaidi, look, the floor is clean over here. There's nothing on the floor. So be quiet. I said, we never saw a car like that before. We got to clean up our cars. It's before Pesach. No nash on the floor. Adi Areb. It's before the evening. It's before Pesach. Says the Tfera Shloimeh, what is the derech yishara sheyivaloi mina Adam? Koshi Teferes Loisea, says the Mishnah. And what does the Mishnah say afterwards? Who remembers? Uteferes Loi Mina Adam. You're going to come up to Shabbat, you know what you're going to be feel good? Uteferes Loi Mina Adam. When you're going to stand in front of Adam Arisha, you're going to say, Adam Arisha, I had such this in my life. I could have given up and put the blanket over my head and go into such a depression, but I didn't. Adam says, thank you. You don't know what you did for me. Uteferes Loi. That's Mina Adam. So he teaches Adam. You know how Adam reaches his tikkun? Ki yakrav mikem karban Lashem. If you understand that the karbanos in your life, that the nisyanos, the losses, the disappointments aren't that the Rabbi Hashem is dumping us, the Rabbi Hashem is putting us into the position to be able to rebuild. Now think about this for a moment, Rabbi said. Adam Arisha went through every possible nisayin in the world that you can go through. Think about it. He had a problem finding a shidduch, right? He says, the Eibusher tried to be mishadachim with all of the behemoths in the world. Didn't work. I'm not going to use that as an analogy to Shachanim, but whatever, you know. And then there was the chet of the Eitzadas, the element of Taiva. The Amunah questions, where all of a sudden the Nachash brought a chashkes on the world. The battle with the Lashon Hara of the Nachash. His slip of the tongue, the lack of a karas hatov towards his wife. Heisha shenasatu imadi. And Adam is thrust out of his environment. Thrust from Gan Eden into darkness. His son Havel is killed by another child, kid at risk, Cain. And he turns around and rebuilds the world. And he goes through a period of separation with Chava in his course of tshuva. And afterwards the Gemara says he's zeicha to a closeness to her that he never even had beforehand. Through tarinus, Shais is there. At the end he gives away 70 years of his life. You know, you realize that in the chet of Eitz Hadas and subsequent ramifications of it, Adam Harishon went through every conceivable test that a person faces down here in this world. Because we were part of Adam Harishon. And the test that we have in our individual lives, says the Torah Shloimeh, is the tikkun of that aspect of Adam Harishon. And is why we are down here in this world. You have to look at the world that way. Tonight's the Yartz of Yaakov Kamenetsky, Seichel Tzadik L'Vracha, Rabbi Einikol over here. Then say Rabbi Yaakov was once, someone told me he had him in the car, and this guy caught ahead of a bus. Rabbi Yaakov told him, what's the matter with you? But Sibur comes first before a Yachid. Sibur, it's a bus. You're a person. Why do you let the bus go ahead of you? Do we think of life that way? You think of life that way when you understand that the purpose of life is how you serve others. Somebody once came to Rabbi Yaakov, I think Rabbi Krohn said it by the Shabbos, and he said, should I send my kid out of town or not? And he asked him, is there shalom bayis in the house? The man said yes, at least he said so. He says, keep him at home. There's no greater lesson for a child to see two parents working together. What are you sending him out of town for? Isn't it interesting? So according to Rabbi Yaakov, what's the yisoid of chinuch? See two children, see two parents, have shalom bayis. And 90% of our bachrim come home when? During the month of Nisan in the house, where shalom bayis is tested more than any other time. It's funny how the Rabbi puts things together. Because this is our test. Our test is to stand up to it. This week was the yard set of, we went to yard sites this week. Reb Chaim Brim, is a very special person in Yerushalayim. So they found, when he was nifter, an interesting notebook that he had. The notebook was Chidushei Torah, and he wrote, these are the Chidushim that I was Mechadish, and was Matzah Shabbos always to his man. Like right after Marav, he wrote down. What is it? It wasn't his derech, I was Mechadish. What was this notebook? No one could figure it out. But one of the Enek Lechat, that his mother once told him, that I saw in a sefer, that we are Mechadish Chidushei Torah on Shabbos. It's a tremendous skula. It brings a tremendous pleasure to a father and mother, or grandfather, grandmother, and Shemai. And his mother must have mentioned this to him. So all Shabbos he would think of Chidushei Torah, and Matzah Shabbos he would write it down. So I want to try to understand this a little bit. What does that mean to Mechadish Chidushei Torah? I don't know how to be Mechadish Chidushei Torah. I mean Mavasedra. It's available to all of us, this option. The Medrash says that Adam Harishon went and he met Cain. They said to Cain, what are you doing? Cain said, I'm doing tshuva. Adam said, tshuva works! Mizmar Shili Yom HaShabbos. And that's Mizmar Shili. What does Mizmar Shili Yom HaShabbos have to do with tshuva? Pesach is Shabbos. Pesach is Mimachos Yom HaShabbos is the first day of Pesach. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh says that in the genes of this world, we were created to go, only our battery goes only 6 days. Shabbos, we are recharged. If not for Shabbos, there would be no world. Now I want to put all of this together. Give me a second, please. There's a machlokes in the Gemara when the world was created. Rabbi Eliezer holds, when was the world created? In the month of, anyone? Tishrei. The Tishrei Nivra. Rabbi Yeshua says, when was the world created? Nisan. Says the Arizal, no machlokes. Tishrei was created b'mitzias, our bodies. And on Nisan, it was created the Machshav. Pipashas, what does that mean? It means that God said, oh, should I create a world? Yeah, not a bad idea. Let me see how would I do it. Okay, here are the plans, That was Nisan. Tishrei, okay, finally you get the contractors and everyone's ready to do it. It takes 6 months. Chasal ask you. By the Rabbi Shalom, Machshav and Maisa is all at the same moment. What does this mean? The Machshav, the Maisa. So went through this Mahal. On Tishrei, God gives us our bodies. We're created, recreated. On Nisan, the Rebbe Hashem gives us our machshava. You can have two people that live the same life. One is in the dumps, and one says, God hates me, and wherever I go, and nothing works out my way, and nothing ever went easy in my life. And there's another guy who has such a simchas achai, and he says, the world is mine. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. There's a guy in Yerushalayim that was walking. Someone told me, he said, I have such a beautiful life. I'm a Gevir Adir, he said. What are you such a big Gevir for? You don't have a ret cent to your name. You're a Schnorrer, Ben Schnorrer, Ben Schnorrer, Ben Schnorrer. He says, I'm the richest guy in the world. He says, look. He says, shoes? See the shoe store? It's my shoe store. It's your shoe store. What are you talking about? He says, what? Whenever I need a pair of shoes, I go in there. And I buy shoes. And he has all these hundreds of shoes for me to pick from. It's made for me. Made for you? Yeah. Imagine I have to keep all these shoes in my house. He keeps it for me. The guy says, I have to travel. He says, look what I have to travel. Look at this. He says, oh, the Egged bus comes, he bangs on the door, waits, he gets on. Look at this big, beautiful bus Hashem made me. He says, what are you talking about? You have to pay for the bus. He goes, don't you see what God did for me? Instead of me having to have a chauffeur, which I pay 24/7 whether he works for me or not, God gives me these things, I don't have to pay them when I use it. Right? He has that attitude. The bakery is his, the bus is his, the world is his. Then you have people that have chauffeurs and limousines and they have nothing, So the simchas achayim, the attitude in life, that comes Nisan. Nisan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu recreates our machshava. Right? The two guys go and he says, why aren't you my friend? Why not my friend? He says, you don't care for me. I don't care for you. He says, remember the day you were hit by a bat? The baseball bat, I took you to, I went to the hospital, I stood there with you from morning to night. He said, yeah, you're the one who hit me with the bat. Right? He said, look what Hashem is doing to me. Hashem doesn't hit us. Hashem places us in a situation where there is where we have to go. But here's the problem. Because I blew it so many times. When God put me here, it said pick up the pebble. I didn't do it. This Gilgal, next Gilgal, now I'm in a huge swamp, and the earth, the quicksand's up to my nose. It's my fault, I got in here. So here is where we come along. Okay, Uncle Yaakov?
Yeah.
And we say as follows. The Maral says, here's what happens during the month of Nisan. During the month of Nisan, you are recreated. Okay? Just like you see in the Bria. Look at the entire world. Look at the entire world. It's new. The flowers come out. That's only telling you what's going on in Shemayim. In Shemayim, the Rabbi says, I'm recreated? Yesterday I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Let me go to the doctor. Same high blood pressure, high cholesterol. What do you tell me I'm recreated? I'm the same person. If I go and I call my mother and I say, Ma, come pick me up. Why? I went with these motorcycle guys and I drove off to some forsaken place and now I'm about to be killed. Please come pick me up. My mother says, why did you go there? Why did you do that? I'm not coming to pick you up once and for all. I mean, how you call me? I'm not sure a mother should talk to a child that way, but you can imagine the mother's upset. Suppose I call my mother and I say, they grabbed me, they put me on a motorcycle, and they put me over here, and this is where I am. I'm coming to get you. What does it mean that the Rebbe recreates us? Generally, we're responsible for where we are. You got yourself into the rut, get yourself out of it. Comes Nisan, Hashem says, we're starting again from point A. It's as if I put you here. That's how Chodesh Ezelechem Roish Chadashim. That's how the Maral explains it. It's a much higher level of tshuva. And that's the Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. This is where Adam went ahead of Cain. Cain said, tshuva, I'm crying, but his tshuva wasn't sincere. Adam said, no. I don't know why the Chet Eitzadas happened, but I believe what has to happen happened. You should be ashamed of yourself. God will never accept you. You did these things. You got yourself into this rut. You messed up your Shalom Bayis. You messed up your Parnasa. It starts new. It doesn't mean come the morning of Rosh Chodesh Nisan everything in your life is going to change. But Hashem considers it brand new. Ma, this is where I am. Can you get me? Sure, I'm coming to get you. That's the tshuva of Nisan. And that's the Benisan b'machshava nivra ha'olam. In terms of machshava, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, brand new slate. And he wants you in a very deep of heart. Tomorrow morning, I hate to disappoint you people, but remember it's your last tachman for 30 days. If you say tachman tomorrow. Right? 30 days, no tachman. 30 days, no tshuva? Every day, Hashem do v'gadol? All of a sudden, Nisan, I got tshuva? Yeah, because the first 12 days, by the way, some chassidim aren't saying for the last 7 days, but Hashem is your name, no tshuva, what's going on over here? Because it's a different level of tshuva. It's the tshuva of Adam Rishon. The tshuva of Cain is a Shamlu v'gadol. The tshuva of Adam Rishon is Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. That's Pesach, that's Nisan. God, brand new. I'm cleaning out the kishkas. I'm cleaning out my house. I'm cleaning everything 10,000 times with a toothbrush. Every last. As a new person. And the Rebbe Hashem considers it brand new. And I want to give you a practical example of this. I once had a Rebbe, he was such a tzaddik. I was out in Shmoneh Esrei. I was a 14-year-old kid. Now my Shmoneh Esrei, my mind was wandering. In 2 seconds, I was finished Shmoneh Esrei. And I start walking out. My Rebbe stops me. Oh no, he saw me down in Shmoneh Esrei in 2 seconds. And he shows to me that you're not allowed to walk by somebody who's davening Shmoneh Esrei. He said, I know, you're not allowed to walk in front of someone who's davening Shmoneh Esrei. Even if you're in a rush. Rabbi Moshe was once supposed to go someplace, there was a little kid davening, he stopped. They said, hey, little kid, you know, we're playing our matches, like a Torah meeting, you know. Rabbi Moshe said, if there's a wall here, could I walk through the wall because I'm late? That's how he viewed the halach. So my Rebbe said to me such a beautiful vart. He says, you see how nice Hashem is to you? You stepped out Shmoneh Esrei. You didn't daven such a good Shmoneh Esrei. I didn't want to tell him like every fifth word probably. 30 seconds Shmoneh Esrei. So what does Hashem do? He gives you this opportunity and says, everyone else around you is still davening. And you're not walking in front of them because you're not allowed to stare at their Shmoneh Esrei. So you like piggyback onto their Shmoneh Esrei. So because they're davening, you're giving cover. So Hashem is giving you a second chance to jump in. And sometimes we make such mistakes that Hashem says, this is your Shmoneh Esrei today. Your Shmoneh Esrei today is show cover to this person's Shmoneh Esrei, and wait till they finish before you can move. God gives us opportunities to be able to get through. So that's the Indian of no tachman. Somebody once came to the Shavina Rav, burst into tears, he began to cry. He said, I'm going to battle, I'm going to war in the Israeli army, I'm going to be killed. Rabbi, give me a bracha. Shavina Rav knew who this person was. Everybody said to him, he's a kid that went totally off, no Shabbos, no nothing. Rebbe, give it to him. Tell him, I'll give you a bracha if you become Shomer Shabbos. The Rebbe said to him, there'll be Shomer Shabbos. He goes, no. Don't push it. You want a bracha? Get at it. Don't get a bracha. The Rebbe says to him, kashrus? No way. Just kick him out. They want to schlep him out of there. What do you want? Give me an easy thing. I'll do it. So the Shabbat Rav says to him, you're a Zidit Shava Einikel, right? Yeah. And you don't say Tachna on Fridays, right? Right. If you keep your minhag of not saying Tachna on Friday, you'll survive the war. They're saying, Rabbi, Shabbos, Tefillin, what? No Tachna Friday, wow. The kid is like laughing his head off. That's all I got to do, Rabbi. No problem. No Tachna Friday. You got it. He goes to battle. He is scared out of his wits. He goes, the bracha, I need the bracha. So comes Friday. He has this very frightening thought. His thought is, if I don't daven, I'm not really not saying Tachna on Friday, because I'm not saying Baruch Shema and Yishtabach Hashmon Esrei either. So he was so petrified, because he saw bodies around him, he started davening everything to make sure that he doesn't say Tachna. Then he began to think, if I don't daven on Friday, if I only daven on Friday, I don't daven the other days, I'm not really not saying Tachna on Friday, because the other days I'm not davening at all. So he started davening all the other days. And said Tachna, so that he shouldn't be able to say Tachna on Friday. Then he began to think, and maybe on Shabbos I'm supposed to say Tachna also, because the whole thing is, I don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, it's only after tefillin, so maybe I should, bottom line started being Shomer Shabbos. Because they're making sure he has this minute, which is going to save his life of not saying Tachna on Friday, he became a whole Shomer Shabbos. He said, you don't tell the Shabbat Rav what to do. In a way, what is God telling us? I'll accept your tshuva! Don't say Tachna the whole nissen. That's all you got to do. Hey, that's a cinch. If you really got to do it. You know what that means? You don't say Tachna the whole nissen? It means Mizmashil Yom Shabbos. It means, okay, I got nothing to do tshuva from. It's as if I'm brand new. No time is that means that I'm in the swamp. It's as if I was put here. But let me see what you're doing for me now. Move on it. Move on it the right way. And let me tell you something. In these couple of months, we are going to be tested. I was I was in California someplace. We had a retreat, and it was like these beautiful mountains near Palm Springs, and it was like the quiet. I never heard such quiet in my life. And a fellow tells me, want to come to the mikvah shot this morning? I said, what, some spring or a mountain? I don't know. No, mikvah. You know mikvah? We walked down a trail. Sure enough, there's a Chabad guy there, and he has a gorgeous mikvah in this little place. Yeah, there we go. So we go to the mikvah, and I meet this guy. I forgot his name. And then he started telling me his story. He says that he was in the Israeli army, has Israeli accent. And he says, give me a story. Come on, give me a good story that I can use. So he says that he was really part of a top secret brigade. He can't talk about it. I knew that man was going to talk about it, because he was really top of a top secret brigade that he can't talk about. He wouldn't tell me he's part of a top secret brigade that he wouldn't talk about it. So I knew once someone says that, I said, come on, get that with a story. You can tell me. He said, I wouldn't tell anyone, right? So he starts telling me that he was in charge of this real brigade that they went into the worst terrorists and real trained soldiers. And then when they were trained for these missions, they would train and retrain, and they were volunteers. And they would take these 15 men, and they would say, okay, these are the plans. Anyone have any questions? They would start asking questions. There were two kinds of questions. Tactical questions, what do I do, what do I not do? The other kind of questions but what's going to happen if what if I'm captured? They go, forget it, you don't belong here. It had to be guys that were tough. So finally he said, anyway, he finished the last training course. Any questions? No questions. You sure? No questions. No questions. You sure? Okay. Go. They start going, and they're under fire, and they see what's happening, and the pachet is only menorah. And one guy goes, hey, Commander, what's going to happen if it... No questions! Now, if you ask questions, you die. You understand that? You want to live? Move. You know what Pesach is? No matachim. No questions now. I should have. Now, move. Now that the Rebbeinu Shalom says it's brand new, pick up the pieces and go for it. I want to share with you one final story that Chaim Walder has in the book People Speak. It's a great story. It describes her about someone says her mother's in the hospital and she's home, and her father survived the war, and he worked very hard, saved up penny by penny, and the mother's in the hospital. So the girls, married girls, are cleaning up for Pesach, and they're cleaning the attic, and they climb up this ladder, and they open up a trap door, and she finds bags of sugar. And she says to her mother, there's all such stuff in the attic, throw it out. So she throws out the 2 bags of sugar that are there from who knows where. And then a while later, the father comes in, he's talking to them. It's a week or 2 later, says, everything's okay? Good. She says, you cleaned out? Yeah. It's a good thing you're not very thorough. Why not? Because the father says, because in the attic, I have a bag of sugar where I hid $60,000 cash. And she goes, yeah. She doesn't say a word. The father has a heart condition. They go back. The mother's sick. She's going to go, She says, I'm committing suicide. I'm going. My father saved up that money his whole life. He worked as I don't know what, 8 hours a day. I'm finished. And his mother was very sick, and she called him over because she heard what she said. So I want to tell you something. Okay? She says, I'm lying here on this bed. I don't know what's going to be. My father, we didn't save up that money for you to give up your life. This is what the Rebbeinu Shem wanted. This is what the Rebbeinu Shem, we're going to work around it. She goes, Father's going to ask me for the money. What am I going to do? Trust me. He is not going to ask you for $60,000. Right? He's a Polish. He ain't going to ask you for $60,000. He'll ask you for $500, $1,000 at a time. I'm going to keep $1,000 around. He asks you for $1,000. You climb up. You bring down $1,000. That's all. And that's what they did. Every time he would ask for $1,000, she would climb up, and the mother would give it $1,000, and she would take down $1,000, and that's how it went for a long time. And they were very worried about what's going to be. You know, eventually, many, many years later, the mother passed away, and who's going to give them the $1,000 now? What's going to be now? And she felt that sense of despondency coming up, and she said, you know, her mother was dying. And she said, how dare you fall into a yish? I don't care what mistake you made in your life. We'll pick it up from here. She could say to that matzah, what right do I have to say it? She said, God, you got to get me out of this. And one day he tells her again, you know, I want you to go up to the attic and get me money. She goes, okay. And he says, she said, Father, maybe we should move the money someplace else. Nobody will ever, you know, it's a dangerous place. Anyone can find it. No one's going to find it. No, but that bag of sugar, anyone can find it. You realize what I did, the father says. That I built that false top, and I put some bags of sugar underneath, and the other bag of sugar is on top over there. That's why you're taking it from there. What are you, absent-minded professor? So the guy who comes up, they should take the bottom one. She's like, oh. And sure enough, she climbs up, and there's a false bottom, like a false little roof, and there's a sack of sugar with $60,000 in it. You know? So, like, you would think, here she went through this whole pachad, and the $60,000 wasn't even missing. But I think that the primary lesson of here, besides that you don't lose yourself, how many times in our lives do we think, I lost it, it's gone? Hashem says, it's there, trust me, you didn't lose it. Just have the courage to go on, to understand what it means. I'll give you the 1,000 when you need it. And if you have the courage to take that 1,000 and keep living with it, you'll see. All the money will be there, plus more.